This edition of Mac Voices is supported by Macstock Conference Expo and the Midwest Mac BBQ, set for July 16 and 17 in Woodstock, Illinois. Join me, along with Melissa Davis, the Mac Mommy, Jody Spangler of Lakeshore Mac, technologist Kirsten Sia, and Wally Cherwinski of Magic 22. Find out more and register to attend at macstock2016.com. And by ScreenCastsOnline, your source for new Mac and iOS tutorials every week. To learn more and for a 14-day free trial, visit ScreenCastsOnline.com. Welcome back to Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, as people that subscribe to my newsletter know, ran into some technical problems at NAB, had a mic go bad on me, took some great video, but had no audio, and I lost about 10 interviews because of it. So I'm slowly trying to get some of those interviews back, the interviewees back, and let them cover what we covered there, even though you never saw it. So my first shot at accomplishing this is with Wes Plate of Automatic Duck. He was kind enough to give me some time on the show floor. He's kind enough to give me some time now to recreate that discussion about their announcements. Wes, it's great to see you again.
It's good to see you again, Chuck.
And thank you again so much for putting up with my technical failure.
Oh, no problem. It's good to talk to you again. Maybe we could recreate the magic we had on the show floor.
It was magic, wasn't it?
It sure was.
So what we talked about, which this is a very weird way to go about an interview, but what we talked about were the announcements Automatic Duck made at NAB, and I wanted to get you to go back and talk a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. At NAB, Automatic Duck announced some new products that we are bringing out soon. Actually, I should say a product. So we've announced a product that we're calling Xsend Motion. And Xsend Motion is a new product that translates Final Cut Pro 10 timelines into Apple's Motion product. Users of Final Cut Pro 7 might remember that there was a great feature called Send to Motion, where you could right-click on some clips in the timeline, and they would open up as a project inside of Motion 4. And it was a very great workflow for those two apps to work in hand-in-hand together. And when Apple redid Final Cut Pro 10, this particular feature did not make the new re-architected version of Final Cut Pro. And a lot of users have been asking over the years if they could have some sort of send to motion feature back into Final Cut Pro 10. And we also got that request quite a lot too, because Automatic Duck has been known ever since 2001 as a company that makes timeline translation tools. So in the past, we always created translation tools that would get you between products made by different manufacturers. For example, taking an Avid sequence into Adobe After Effects or a Final Cut sequence to Avid. We were always sort of cross-platform, cross-company translation tools. But this time we decided we would take a look at how could we create a translator between two tools from the same company. So we've been working closely with Apple to create this new product that we're calling Xsend Motion that brings back some of that magic of that send to motion workflow that people liked in Final Cut 7.
I'm sure there are going to be folks out there that say, now, wait a minute. Final Cut is a nonlinear editor. Motion is motion graphics. What are you doing here? Even though a lot of us are familiar with opening, let's say, a plugin to edit it in Motion. Why would I want to take a Final Cut timeline and move it over into Motion?
Well, Motion these days is really used a lot of times to create effects or create plugins or to adjust or modify plugins. But it's also a very, very powerful animating tool and compositing tool. And so there are things you can do inside of Motion natively. Let's say, for example, doing some match moving. You have much better keyframe control in Motion with a much nicer and larger user interface section to control keyframes. So there are things that you can do in Motion that are just more elegant than you can do inside of Final Cut natively. So by using Motion as a motion graphics tool, as almost like what people use After Effects for, you can do a lot of stuff that Final Cut can't do all by itself. So the problem is just trying to get those clips from Final Cut to Motion so that you can then work with them. And so that's the workflow really will be that you have some sort of compositor, you have some clips that you want to animate, work, use them together or create a composite of them together. And Motion can do it in a better way than Final Cut can. And so our bridge will help you get that workflow down.
Now, does this, and I realize, this is not a product that's out yet. So, but having said that, is this a round tripping tool where I send it to Motion, then bring it back to Final Cut, or is it a one-way trip?
Well, our product is half of that round trip workflow. So what we're able to do is we are able to read XML from Final Cut Pro 10 and then convert that XML into a Motion project. And so we're able to do that sort of outside of any boundaries that Apple might have technologically, and it allows us to do this work. But the other side of taking a Motion project back into Final Cut is something that third parties perhaps have less ability to do. That's more Apple's realm. But really, if you're working inside of Motion, chances are you want Motion to do the compositing for you. At least you want the Motion engine to do that work. So when you're done working inside of Motion, you have two options currently for getting your work back to Final Cut. First of all, you could export a QuickTime movie, which will take some time to render, but you'll end up with an asset that you can treat like any other QuickTime movie, and then it'll play back in Final Cut in absolute real time, and you'll be happy. The other option is you can publish that Motion project as a generator, and that will then show up in the generator browser inside of Final Cut Pro, and then it'll play back in Final Cut, perhaps not in real time, depending on what the complexity of that Motion project. But of course, you can render it in Final Cut and then play it. One nice thing about the generator concept is that you could use stuff like maybe add drop zones into your project. And so you could build up a template inside of Final Cut, build up the work that you have in mind, kind of get your timings of your clips arranged, bring that over to Motion, get your design work done. But maybe some of the clips that you used in Final Cut were really just sort of placeholders for timing. Maybe you want the editor to have the ability to swap those shots out really quite easily. So by publishing that project as a generator with drop zones, you would now send that back over to Final Cut Pro 10, and the editor has the ability to change the contents of that composition through the drop zones inside the inspector. So there's a lot of workflow possibilities that are going to be opened up with this kind of workflow. But basically, to answer your question, to get back, we're going to be able to get you from Final Cut Pro 10 to Motion, and then getting from Motion back to Final Cut Pro 10 is basically the same way it is today, either rendering a QuickTime movie or publishing a generator.
I have to admit, I guess I'm not sophisticated enough to even think about bringing it back in as a generator. But like you said, with the ability to add drop zones, wow, that makes perfect sense to me, that I could create a project exactly the way I want it, and then have second and third projects that could then be dropped into drop zones back in Final Cut. Say the intro to a show, for example, where I wanted the last 3 shows that I've done in drop zones. And so I'd constantly be changing that, and it would be a nightmare to do it. But if you have it in a generator and just can throw them in there, wow, that's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I think it's going to open up a lot of really interesting workflow opportunities. There are advantages and disadvantages to both ways of getting back from Motion to Final Cut. One of the nice things about the old Final Cut 7 and Motion 4 days was that Final Cut 7 could basically play back any Motion project regardless of where it was stored on your hard drive. It almost treated any .motn file. It treated it as though it was any kind of QuickTime movie. With Final Cut 10, it'll only play back those generators if they've been published, into the generators part of the Final Cut interface. Generators, however, don't play any audio, so that's a difference than a QuickTime movie can't have audio with it. Generators also do live in the generator browser, which is separate from where all your other assets live. So if you're backing up a project, you're going to have to remember to back up the generator, which is buried inside your Motion templates folder. So there are sort of pluses and minuses to both, and I think users will find what works best for them. And then I do hope that we will see improvements from Apple in terms of how this workflow goes down the road.
This is very unfair. I know I asked you this question on the floor. This is very unfair, but what kind of time are we talking about to move a project from Final Cut into Motion, recognizing that it depends on the length of project, the number of assets and all? Is it a time-intensive process?
You're talking about the actual workflow using Xsend Motion to send a project from Final Cut 10 to Motion?
Yes.
Well, I think users can expect, even if it's a fairly long project, I would expect it should take less than 10 seconds.
Okay,
because
of the XML, yeah.
Yeah, it's if it's a single clip, it'll take, less than a second. If it's an hour-long project, maybe it'll take several seconds. I haven't personally tested an hour-long project because I don't see the value in sending an hour-long project from Final Cut 10 to Motion. But our product doesn't really care about the duration of your project. It's just, as you said, it's reading XML and just then converting it into something else. There's a lot of smarts that has to happen along the way, but computers are good at doing this sort of thing, and so it doesn't take a lot of processing power. Nothing has to be rendered. No media files are created, so storage requirements aren't increased. Files aren't copied. So yeah, it's very fast. And in fact, I'm getting really good with keyboard shortcuts. Our product is integrated with the share menu inside of Final Cut Pro 10. So in Final Cut 10, you open up the project. From the share menu, you choose Xsend Motion, and that brings up our interface. But we're able to do things with, we've got an option in our product that will allow you to work even faster by, if you are using the share menu, it'll basically bypass the user interface of our product because maybe you've already set up the settings and you don't need to see the settings again. And so that, maybe a combination with some keyboard shortcuts, you can select some clips and have those clips into motion, before you, without even thinking about it. It's just, boom, 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 click, click, click. Now motion comes forward and you're working in that environment. So the speed of the translation will not be an issue for anybody.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking about what you were saying before about exporting and rendering and all, and I'm not thinking about the fact that you're just pulling in XML.
Yeah, no, it is so fast sometimes that, it makes it feel like it's all one environment, and that's what my goal and hope for the product is that users won't feel like they're working in one product and then having to move to a different product so that they can then translate to yet a third product. Once you use all of these together in concert, it starts to feel like they are all one thing working together, and you don't feel like time is your enemy. It works really well.
So this is on the horizon, and I will ask, although I think I already remember the answers, that timing and price.
Right. So we announced at NAB that we will be shipping the product soon. And we also did not announce any pricing or availability at that time. So when we are shipping soon, we will announce price at that time.
Okay. Yeah.
And the good news is, Chuck, since it's been about a month since we last talked, soon is much closer than it was then.
Yeah. Wait a minute, I got to go find the dictionary to look up soon, see if I can get a quantitative definition. Wes, before we go, give us a quick rundown on some of the other automatic duck products for the folks who might not be familiar with this.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'll just give a very brief history. So like I said, we started in 2001 with an After Effects plugin that read Avid projects. And that was our first step into the world of timeline translation. From there, we started working on a Final Cut Pro. So this is, in those days, it was Final Cut Pro 3. So a Final Cut Pro to After Effects translator. Eventually, we also translated between Final Cut Pro and Avid and lots of other things. But After Effects was the very first thing we did products for. And so when Automatic Duck was announcing, when we brought back a new product last year in 2015, I can't remember what year it is, we actually made another After Effects plugin, and this time it was an After Effects plugin to read Final Cut Pro 10 XML. So back in September, we shipped a new product, which we call Ximport AE. It is actually sold through Red Giant Software, and this plugin lives inside of After Effects and reads Final Cut Pro 10 XML. So it's effectively a bridge from Final Cut Pro 10 to After Effects. So we've been talking about Final Cut Pro 10 to Motion, and so Xsend Ximport AE is a product that will basically be a similar kind of thing for people who are using After Effects together with Final Cut. It is a very great product, and the plugin works very well. And then we also sell a product called Media Copy, and Media Copy is a utility that will read an XML file from Final Cut Pro 10, also reads XML from Final Cut 7 and earlier, I think all the way back to Final Cut 6 or 5, but I don't think anybody uses that anymore. But we also read AAF files, OMF files from Avid, as well as Avid bin files. And what Media Copy does is it figures out all the media files that are referenced by the XML or the AAF, and then copies those files to a location that you specify. And this can be really helpful if you're working in an editing system where you don't necessarily know which media files are being used by your timeline. This is especially true for Avid editors. Their media files are non-human readable names that are stored in a place that only the computer sort of manages, or the software manages for you. And so when you're trying to, let's say you are working with Final Cut Pro together with Motion, but on two separate computers, you want to be able to get the media from that Final Cut system to that Motion system so that you can keep working. But knowing which media files to copy might be a tricky proposition. Now, users of Final Cut who are, savvy will say, well, there's commands for, copying a project into a new library and that kind of thing. And it's true that there are ways inside of many NLEs to consolidate footage or copy media. But the result of that might be a Final Cut Pro library bundle, which the end user of After Effects or Motion might not know what to do with because it looks like it's sort of a hidden folder with a bunch of stuff inside of it. In the case of an Avid, when you do a consolidate, you end up with a whole bunch of new master clips that have a new name extension on the end, and it kind of just creates a mess if you're a tidy editor like I like to be. So with media copy, it's just a simple way to take an XML or AAF and send just those files over to another place. And it's also used by a lot of people for backing up projects as well. So those are the three products that we will be selling, because the Xsend Motion will be the third product, which we're going to be adding to the line. So Ximport AE is an After Effects plugin for reading Final Cut 10 XML. Media Copy is a very helpful utility for copying the media that you're using in your project. And then coming soon is Xsend Motion, which will take a Final Cut Pro 10 project and convert that into a Motion project.
Automatic Duck has a bit of a reputation, I think, for performing magic, things that nobody else can do. And so this just sounds like more continuation of the magic.
Yeah, we've been really blessed that over the many years we've been in business that we've heard from a lot of users that we've been able to make their workflow better. We've been able to send them home earlier at night or give them more time to be creative. And that's sort of the ability that we have to make tools that make the lives of editors better and more enriched is a good place to be. And so, yeah, here we are again doing something that it was impossible or just wasn't getting done. And we're putting our particular spin on it and making sure that it's rock solid and high quality translation. And we can't wait to get it in the hands of users.
That's great. Where do we send people to find out more about this product and all your other products?
Go to automaticduck.com. That's the word automatic and then D-U-C-K, all one word, automaticduck.com, and there you'll find all information about all three of our products. You can also sign up for our mailing list so that when we do ship Xsend Motion, you can be the first to find out about that. You can follow us on Twitter at Autoduck, that's A-U-T-O-D-U-C-K. And if you go to those places, will be a great place to start your learning.
Great. Wes, thanks again for the time, for the update on the new product, and especially for doing it twice for me. I really appreciate it.
It's actually nice to talk to you again, Chuck.
All right, and next time I will have new cables. How's that?
Sounds great. All right, take care.
Okay. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Look for more of these catch-up shows from NAB as we recreate some interviews with some of the great people that we were talking to there. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.